to be giving us the State of Umbraco address next. And that's going to go till roughly 10:40, at which point we'll be able to continue to show our regrets from another more or top and all that. So, you can give the thanks to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And give a big round of applause to Mindfly for putting all this together. I think 1.5 years ago when he said, hey, these festivals you're doing in Europe, we're going to do them in the US, we're going to take care of it. I think they're going like, undo. It's a lot of work, and I mean, it's basically thanks to them that we have this event, so that's quite fantastic. It's also great to be in Orlando. How many was here last year in Vegas? Okay, I think it's cool that you're moving around. I think Florida is a bold move, you know. Because in Florida you have this stand your ground thing. You can shoot someone if you feel threatened, which I didn't think was a problem until I realized Sidecore has a sales office in Florida. So if we all get back alive, then I'll start going to church again, I promise. But it's good. It's good. No, I love Florida. I've been here for a week and I really enjoyed it. It's quite a fantastic place. I'm not going to talk about the tourist stuff, even though I could talk about how the Cuban winds in Key West influenced me, and I feel totally communist and want to do free software and weird things, but I'm not going to talk about that. You know, it's a nice place. Maybe I came to Key West 15 years too early. No, maybe it wasn't spring break yet. It felt like you should be on some sort of pension scheme to get it. But the nature was wonderful, though. Anyway, let's let's go a little bit about Prague. Because it's been quite a fantastic year. About 1.5 years ago, we released version 7, and it's been totally overwhelming how many people have used it ever since. Almost 200,000, which is quite nuts. This last month, we crossed for the first time more than 20,000 new installs in a month, so almost 21,000 installs. So totally crazy. Last year we did 19 releases of Umbraco. Luckily we're not going to keep doing that many. We're not going to keep managing two versions now. Now all our focus is on V7. But we did a lot of work in the core team. We fixed more than 750 bugs. And to everybody who's like, oh, you're so focused on new features, I have facts. And I know I sound like a politician now, but actually for every feature we introduced, we fixed at least 15 bugs, so that's kind of nice. And then the big question, how many active Umbraco installs are running right now? We don't know, but we have a qualified estimate, because we have this thing where Umbraco checks for updates, you know, where your clients call you and saying, why is it saying I have to upgrade? It's actually how we measure active Umbraco installs, and a lot of people disable that. So this is the lowest possible number of active Umbraco installs, and it's over 250,000, which is totally nuts. And what's even more interesting is the adoption in North America. I've been practicing this, not saying the US. But I do have, apparently there's Canadians here, I have to say, there's a Canadian. I have to say, I do have, maybe I say the US and stuff, but all my numbers, they are metric, so it's sort of balanced, I think. Anyway, you're in Disney World, right? So last year there was almost 35,000 installs of Umbraco in North America alone, which is kind of interesting because it actually means that it's the most active embargo country or area in the world. So if we look at a map like this, it's not measles. But this is embargo installs in 24 hours, in a week, in a month. So apparently when you look at embargo in North America, it's much more dangerous than measles. It's much even faster. It's wonderful. So let me just give you some numbers because so looking at the growth rate and the number of installs in North America this year to date, it looks like we'll be very close to 50,000 installs, new installs of embargo in North America this year, which is kind of cool. It's double up from 2013. Which means, this is a low resolution projector, but there's actually a Canadian. So in North America, sometimes people in North America is like, oh, everything happens in Europe, that's where all the cool stuff is going on. But actually, as I mentioned, in North America, that's where you have most installs. It's also where some of the greatest packages from Rock come from. So we have Lucello, super cool open source e-commerce engine. We have Archetype, which is really, I don't know, innovating or changing the way that you can build your pages in an environment. It's actually something that heavily influenced some of the stuff we want to do moving forward. So that's super cool. So you actually have everything you need in North America to have the best community. The only thing you need is to contribute. And here's a story. So the biggest user group for embargo is in London. They meet every month, and sometimes the 20 people, sometimes they have their annual festival. They are 250 with hundreds of people on waiting lists. But the way it started was a guy called Adam Shallcross. He said, okay, let's meet every month on this pub. And in the beginning, and not just the beginning, but for quite a while, there was only less than a handful of people coming. But they kept on doing it. And basically that's how we built up a community. The first Coke Garden we did was 23 people. This year we're going to be 500. But it's persistence. Just keep on going. If you enjoy it, if you want to do a user group, for instance, because you want to meet with other people, then claim it a success until you don't talk to yourself. That is kind of pathetic. Well, not really. It's more like a disease. But as long as you're a couple of people, then keep on doing it and make sure you talk about embargo to other people, and that way it's actually the way you build a community. I mean, this event is a great example. Double up attendees in a year, which is kind of crazy. So I think you have all the potential to make us European envy what you have over here. So hopefully that's gonna start happening in 2015. So enough of that. Let's talk a little bit about the other stuff that we're doing with embargo on the stuff we're focusing on moving forward. So we've been talking about this embargo as a service for a long time. Actually, before I came here, I've been on a honeymoon in Florida. That's why I've been here. It was, however, 11 and a half years ago since I got married. But just like embargo as a service, all good comes to those who wait. And I'll tell you, it was worth the wait, and I hope this will be as well. So it used to be embargo as a service, now it's called embargo.com. And the whole idea with embargo as a service is, make it easy to get started with embargo, just one click and you're up and running. Less maintenance, so people who build embargo solution can focus on do stuff that creates value rather than focusing on installing, upgrading, deploying, etc. And we've been working on this for 2.5 years now. It's one of those things. I guess it's like getting married. It's a good thing you don't know what you go into before you start. But at least we have more than 500 projects running on embargo.com now. A lot of quite big grants. One of them is probably one you will recognize. The other three you will go like, what is that? But this is the largest brewery in Europe. They're rolling out our platform. This co-op thing is like the Walmart of Scandinavia. They're also rolling out all their brands in all countries on product service. This one is, it's also football, but it's the type of football where you use your feet. I know it's totally weird, but it's the Danish, I guess, Soccer Association. They're rolling out 1,400 clubs on the platform. And that last thing, it's a sport you have over here, and I think there's going to be someone later talking about that project. But Rocket.com isn't perfect yet. We are learning a lot from these early adopting customers, and we keep trying to make it better and better and better before we can do a global launch. But we're constantly taking on new projects. And one of the things that Rocket.com has done over the years is actually influence the core a lot. So one of the things that's difficult to see is that we've made a ton of performance enhancements, both in terms of how fast the browser is and how little resources it uses over the last couple of years. Because the more projects we can squeeze into our platform, the lower the price of Rocket.com can be. So that's of course a great motivation for us. Also, some other things that are coming is improved security. It's actually coming probably already in 7.3, where we introduce OAuth 2 and OAuth 2 support, which I have a demo of. But why don't I just show that demo instead of talking? It's a tiny little demo, but it's kind of cool. So let's get this one over here. So right now I'm logged into a browser, that's all good. The reason why I was logged in is because I was already signed in with Google. So one of the things you're going to be able to, in the new security model we're introducing in Brago, is that you can link your account to other OAuth 2 providers. It could be Active Directory, Google, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you want. So in this case, I've actually associated my Brago account with my Google account, and I can click here, and I get automatically logged into from Brago. Which also means that, for instance, if you have a company policy of using two-factor auth, then you can actually activate that. And all of this is a result of stuff we needed to make Brago.com even smoother, the way we work with that, and that's going straight back into the core. And again, in this case, right now the UI is not going to look like this. It's just our prototype. But I can also, if I want to, I can link it to my Facebook account. I hope there won't be any embarrassing pictures. We'll see. And maybe I can even remember my password here. Oops. No? Awesome. That's how much I use Facebook. And that's how much you should use it as well. Let me try. Yeah, that's an internal joke. I delete my Facebook account every 6 months, saying you shouldn't be on Facebook, and then, oh, okay. Apparently I can't log in through Facebook. Anyway, at least I could log in through my Google account, which I use a lot. Which is much less evil than Facebook, right? So that's awesome. But anyway, this is coming to a Brago installation near you very, very soon. Another thing that's also coming, let's just get this back on, is auto scale. One of the things we're working on Brago as a service is sort of a high performance plan, and we made R&D actually a couple of years ago on Azure where we could sort of auto-scale an Embrago site. But the way we made it was quite hacky. This time we actually made it super elegant. So from Embrago 7.3 and moving forward, it can auto-scale without any configuration needed. So whether you're on Embrago as a service or your own on-premise platform, as you add more servers and just point them to the same Embrago database, it will automatically configure the scaling of and distribution of cache, etc. So no more really difficult load balancing, fiddling, and that's also a byproduct of Embrago.com. And if I'm online, I just got to show you a couple of things we're working on Embrago.com as well. So let's just see. This is Embrago.com. It looks so incredibly sexy. There's nothing more sexy than deployment interfaces. Anyway, the idea with Embrago.com is that it should be easy to get started. So the way you start a project on Embrago.com is you choose the plan, you give your project a name, uWestfest, and then you click Create New Project, and what happens is that we create 3 environments for you, a dev, a staging, a live environment, separate databases, set up source control, you can invite team members, etc., all that is set up. And again, thanks to this new security model, we have like a unified login. So use the same login to log into this portal, to your Embrago installations, to your source code repository, etc. Another thing we made is something we call baselines. So Embrago.com is actually a byproduct of talking a lot to agencies about what do they spend their time on. And it turns out that a lot of agencies make, let's say they have the same foundation for a lot of their clients. And some of the best ones, they have sort of a starter kit that they install themselves. Those who do might not be that good at updating that starter kit. So what we found was agencies actually waste a lot of time in just setting up new installations. So what we have is we have something called baselines. So you can have sort of your own starter kit, but they are real live Embrago installations. They have fully dev stage live environments. They have a source code repository. And what happens when you pick one of these as your foundation for a new project is that we actually do a clone of that project, so we have a connection back to the original project, which means, for instance, let's say that you have 20 sites out there, and you realize, oh, in some of the stuff you made, there was a cross-scripting issue, so you have to go update 20 sites. Well, with Embrago as a service and baseline, you can just update the baseline. You can test it once it works. You can click a button and it pushes out that change to all the child projects. And because everything in Embrago as a service, whether it's content, metadata, or your source code, runs in source code and version control, we can do merges even of more advanced things such as changes in master and templates, etc. So that's kind of cool. Another thing that we are almost done with is upgrades, and we have this concept in Embrago as a service, of this vision that we really want to get rid of the idea of running a version of Embrago. We dream of one day it will just be running Embrago, and you will more or less always be on the latest version. Internally we call this Edge. So it's not a nightly build of Embrago, but it's a tested nightly, so to say, of a heavily tested version of a nightly. So rather than having Embrago releases once a month, we could have, let's say, 5-10 releases a month instead. Because this idea of a stable release, it basically comes back to down to the way you did software development in the 80s and 90s. Has anyone ever seen pictures of Lotus 123? How many knows Lotus 123? Have anybody ever seen pictures of one of their first offices? So half the space was where developers and product people were creating Lotus 123. The other half was where they packed and wrapped the software. So they produced the diskettes and put them in a cardboard box and wrapped it and distributed it. And that's where this idea of a stable version comes from. Because back then, it took 12 to 18 months from a release was done until it was installed somewhere. Which means that you have to go through a really, really rigid testing phase. Today, people expect software much faster, which also means that even when we do a lot of testing, we do the nightlies, we have massive test suites, we increase our test suites heavily the last couple of years. We have alphas, we have betas, we have release candidates, we have releases, and then the version that comes out 2 days after release is so much more stable than the real release. So what we want to is really to have people always working on what we believe is the latest and greatest version of the product. And the way we can do that is, first of all, by improving our testing, which we've been doing the last couple of years, then having these special branches of Umbraco where it's not a nightly, but it's, as I mentioned, a heavily tested nightly, and then a way to quickly push out these versions to people running Umbraco. So even if it fails, there's a bug in that one, we could have an upgrade maybe an hour after that. So you're always running on the best version of Umbraco possible. And right now, one of the things we have right now is that it's a manual process. But for instance, if I wanted to upgrade this project, which this was our, it's an internal joke. We had a sort of a slight deployment issue this week, which reminded us how awesome this is going to be. Because it's our is let's say it has a digital patina. It has a slight amount of dust and hacks, being a site that's I think it's 6 years old now. Actually 7 years old later this year. So it has its charm, and apparently, even though we had done 2 trials of upgrading the site to the new version of Umbraco that's coming, the deployment totally fails, which of course is a good. But anyway, if I want to upgrade this site, I just click this button and it actually starts to do the whole upgrade thing. And what it actually does is it creates a clone of my site, runs the upgrade on that one. After that, we can run tests. Is that upgrade working fine? Then we can merge it back into your site. So it's sort of safe upgrades. So if the upgrade actually fails, your site won't crash. And one of the ideas is, on top of this, is adding something like when you have uptime services like Pingdom, where you can specify a couple of URLs saying this is the HTTP code I expect back. I want this URL to at least return this text or contain this text. So what we can do is, after we run our tests on your site, we can run a couple of your tests on top of that, and if that succeeds, well, then we can merge the updates back in. Anyway, it's not that interesting to see a site gets upgraded, but we get the idea. Rather than upgrading is something you have to schedule or fear. It could either be something that's running in the background, or it could be something you do just by clicking a button. And again, automated updates will never ever be for anything but patch updates. Don't panic. You can disable it. It's not like, now you're on version 10. And the interface looks terrible, and your package moves. That's not what it is. Okay? But upgrades are important. We haven't done major changes to the core of Umbraco in quite a while. There's been so many security firms who've done audits on Umbraco, and still, every time there's a new security audit, some find a tiny, tiny little security flaw somewhere in Umbraco. So it's really important to make sure that you keep your sites updated, especially when we send out the security bulletin. And this is one of the reasons why we want something like this always be running on the latest and greatest, just like operating system. But anyway, I can talk about Umbraco as a service for days, but let's just leave it at that. Pretty excited. We're really close. We're gonna add more trial projects over the next couple of months, and when we believe that it's ready, then we're gonna launch it, and not before that. One of the things we do work on is the sort of a central part of Umbraco as a service is the deserialization engine of data, which is what makes it possible to deploy sort of your database across environments. We learned a lot from that over the last couple of years. Part of that is Courier. There's good things about Courier, there's bad things about Courier, but the serialization engine of Courier is something that belongs inside the core, and that's something we're working on. Which means that whenever we're ready in it, probably sort of a version 8 thing, then whether you run on Brago as a service, whether you use Courier on premise, whether you use uSync or whatever, and then you're going to be able to benefit from great deserialization and serialization in the core from Brago. So that's the point. If you have a project that could be a match for Brago.com, then make sure to sign up on the waiting list at Brago.com/future, or even better, come see Paul. He's here, and he's like the cool guy. He can get you in front of the waiting list. So he's our bouncer for this project. So make good friends with him, and you get to be a part of the exclusive project. Anyway, let's move on. One of the things where we learned a lot from the Brago.com project is, one thing is to build all this software, and that's good. As it sort of matured and came closer to release, we realized, well, we're just a bunch of geeks who really want to do a great software project. We really don't know anything about business. I mean, after all, there's never been a business plan. Brago is open source. I think when Brago is so liberal, then I can't get into Qt. It's quite difficult. So anyway, we needed to learn a lot in growing the company, so we're actually ready for launching this project, which means now we are no longer just 5 people, which we were when we started the project. Now we're 15, probably going to grow to twice as that pretty soon. We finally got a real office. It's so weird, but it's cool. If you ever come to Denmark, you should come see it. And we got something as boring as a board of directors, and we actually got funding in place. No, not VC funding, like healthy funding. But that's actually been surprisingly challenging, because doing a project like Brago.com is super expensive. And I don't want the company to ever take VC money. I don't believe it's the right fit for the company. Just like we've been trying to get more experienced business people to help us. And finding business people who want to get involved in Brago is really easy. Finding people who understand that first and foremost, it's going to be an awesome project with an awesome community. And because of that, it's going to be like a private company. It's going to be great. It's not the company first. No, that's difficult. But we finally found the people who can help us. So now we feel like we're ready to actually grow a little bit faster than we used to, which is great for Brago.com, and it's really great for the core as well. Because it means that now the majority of our focus is making a product that relies on the core from Brago, rather than trying to make add-ons that might want to fit inside the core, but hey, we need to make money somehow. So it feels so much better to do this Brago.com project. Anyway, another thing that we've learned a lot is improving documentation. It used to be documentation was something like, oh, we made this awesome feature, and it describes itself. If you made it. We've been so bad at making documentation, but one of the things we have now as a policy internally is that as a part of our definition of when things is done is when there's documentation. So a great example of this was when we built the grid layout feature for 7.2. The documentation was actually ready before the release of 7.2. It's really weird, but it feels good. Another thing we're working on is the famous new hour, which also has a completely new way of doing documentation. We worked a lot with community people on how could we both experienced ones and new ones, how could we make it easier to understand the documentation of Brago, what do we need to get rid of, what type of documentation needs to be there, and it has a completely new format, and honestly I can't wait to share with all of you. it's so weird when you build the software, you don't know how difficult it is to use. But when you see the documentation, you're like, why on earth did we never prioritize that? Of course, resources, but still. So that feels really good that finally Embargo gets the documentation it deserves. Another thing is something weird called usability testing. There's this thing that you build a feature and you think it's easy to use and it looks good and you release it and it makes no sense. And then instead we set up a usability lab at the office. So for instance, when we did the grid layout, we actually did a bunch of rounds of usability testing, both with developers, designers, and editors, and it influenced a lot on how the grid changed over those months. And another thing we're working on with the new office is just being more transparent. Our door is always open. I know it's silly because it's in Denmark, so it sounds ridiculous. But anyway, the idea is that when we want real life feedback on stuff, we can actually just say, hey, we set up this awesome workshop room at the office, can fit 20 people. Come, try this feature, give us feedback. And for instance, I mentioned this archetype influence. We want to change how you do document types. And what we did was we said, hey, on this date, come and be a part of our internal workshop where we want to, in the company, when we want to plan how the document type editor should work. Well, if you want to get involved, just drop by and we can participate. And there was actually, I think, how many people were we? Like 15 or something? Yeah, it was really good. So both people new to Embargo and people, again, who were experienced could sort of be a part of the early planning that we did internally, even before we then opened up and saying, this is our ideas, what do you think? See our prototypes. So I think it's something that, we've only been there since October. We can already see sort of the benefits. So that's really nice. So now, what I have 20 minutes? 15 minutes? How much time do I have left?
20.
20. Awesome. So how many have used version 7.2? Okay, that's good. 7.2 should have been named 8. Because that way it would have been easier for people to understand why did it take so long to release it, and also why is it called 7.2 when there's all these cool features in it. But it's because it's not backwards, it's because it is backwards compatible. So I almost felt like I wanted to add a breaking change, just so because it's really good. I mean, it's really difficult. So you go to client, you say, hey, there's a 7.2 out, and it's like, what makes it release? It doesn't matter. But anyway, 7.2 is like if you haven't played with it, you should definitely do that. It's fantastic. We've added a couple of cool features, and I'm just going to go through some of them. Something we call Query Builder. Again, an easier way to get started with Embargo. One of the things when we did surveys, found out that the hardest part of getting started with Embargo from a designer and developer point of view is understanding how you do queries of data, which still isn't perfect. Now we've added a Query Builder, so you sort of have a visual way of doing your queries, and you can get sample code out of it. I'm going to demo it a bit later. Compositions, which is also kind of cool. We made changes to the list view based on feedback, added responsive preview rather than just a dummy preview, and the fancy grid layout thing, which we hope will replace the visual editor. But rather than talking, let's just do a super fast demo of some of these enhancements. So let's start with this Query Builder thing. So the idea is, for instance, you have to make some sort of list, and you have no idea how to query that data. Well, then the idea is you can say, I want, let's just say, landing pages from this part of my site, and then you can add sort of where clauses. You can order them by something, like create date, descending, ascending, and then you get a real-time view of the results coming out and how long it takes, and if you think, okay, that's cool, then you can click insert, and it will just insert some sample code for you. So it's kind of a cool way of making these queries and get started with doing queries in the project. Another thing is compositions. So how many have tried compositions? Okay. How many have tried master document type? Okay. So this is the idea. You have a lot of different document types, but they might share some of the same things. Like maybe you have some magic SEO stuff. You know, every SEO guy ought to only just make a text string called ulala. And that's basically what they do. Anyway, so you have some ulala, you need that. Then you have some data, might be some tags. You have some navigation basics, high navigation, etc. And then you create a new document type, and rather than just having a sort of a hierarchy, you say, well, this document type actually don't need the SEO stuff, but I would love the metadata and the navigation stuff. Then with compositions, you can just mix and match. So you say, I want this and I want this. And then it automatically inherits both tabs and properties from those document types. So rather than the old system where it was like object-oriented inheritance, now this is much more like Ruby-style mix-ins, where you can just mix and match from other things, which is quite nice. So that's another good thing. Then we have this grid thing. And the idea with the grid is that it's not sort of, it's not a silver bullet or anything. The idea is first and foremost to replace the rich text editor. The rich text editor sucks, not because it's worse than other CMS rich text editors, but because the idea of a rich text editor, especially in a world gone responsive or adaptive, is totally nuts. You shouldn't mix layouts with content. So what we first and foremost wanted was a more controlled way of adding content without compromising the flexibility that editors love. So I want a picture to the right, or I want a block code over here. So a bit like those long reads you see, that was one of our inspirations. So could we create a nice editor that would make it easy to create these long reads, then that would be great. So the idea is that you can have different types of rows. For instance, a headline, which is just one big chunk of content, or you can have, in this case, an article, which has something on the left and something on the right. And all this can be defined using grid systems. So rather than just saying this is full width, then this is actually like 12 columns. And let's just add an image here. So this is about budget, so let's take this guy. He is totally uncontrollable, not even the crop over. And then we want to start an article, and then we can just, you get the idea. We can add quotes, and over here we want some content, etc., etc. So that's the idea of the grid. So once we have this, let's just have some, get some content here. And then let's have some loading from here. That ought to be a feature in the browser, right? You shouldn't really have to go here. A bit like Word, just type it and double tap. Okay, whoops. Let's go back. And this. All good. So this is nice. Then we can preview it, and this is the responsive preview. So this is again using a grid system. This is how it looks on a full-scale computer. How does it look on mobile? Well, we can see that like this. Different format, tablets, etc. And all this is also configurable. So for instance, let's say you're making something that also sends data to a in-store display or something. So here we use that. We would also have some different views for that over here. And it's quite nice for editors to quickly be able to see, does this layout layout actually works or doesn't work. So that's another major improvement in 7.2. Pierre is going to cover all the details of the grid, so you should definitely check out this session. I have that on the slide in a moment. But just an example of what I talked about, what we're trying to do with the company, this all already influenced in 7.2. So we got new features in the grid thanks to feedback from our workshops. The UX got improved through the editor testing, and we made it easier to implement for designers and developers thanks to tests with them as well. But again, Pierre will show you all the details of the grid in his session, so I'll spare you more details. Another thing I would love to talk about is sort of a Umbraco DNA, which is simplicity. So the name Umbraco is actually the Danish word for these. Actually, it's a spelling error, but you probably heard that story already. In Denmark, everybody calls these Umbracos, but they're really called unbreakables for unbreakable. I didn't know that. I googled, got a lot of results. I filed for the trademark. I got the trademark. I was like, yeah, I have the trademark for these pieces. And then after 2 years, some guy made a blog post saying, with all the CMSs out there, I would never choose one with a bug in its name. But then again, it's a bit like Apple and the Macintosh, which was also incorrectly spelled. Later on, the official spelling of the Apple changed to the way that Apple spelled it. In Denmark, if you Google for unbreakable, it says, did you mean Umbraco? We're getting there. We get calls as well. Sometimes we get these calls saying, I want to know the strength of a half inch. You just want to see 21. See a building collapse. Anyway, but I want to talk a little bit about simplicity. And rather than talking a lot, I want to demo it. So the idea with what I'm going to show you now is just this tiny couple of examples on how you can make a slightly easier editor experience. Using some of it using the built-in features, some of them maybe spend some time learning how easy it is to extend the Umbraco background. So not everybody knows, but in Umbraco we have a soccer team, which actually we won one match. So pretty impressive. We organized a tournament, and officially we won. Unofficially, there is rumors that we got last, but just like North Korea, nothing official has come out. Anyway, so we want to have on this website we want to have some way of saying what's the current team, what's the squad. We have a lot of players down here as notes, so we can have fancy stats on them. So, for instance, Simon here, his numbers. How good is he? Because eventually we want to print cards. Anyway, so this is the first thing that springs to mind. So we have these text boxes, which is kind of cool. So you can be 2,000 in defending. Makes no sense. It can also be awesome, which would be a lie. So we want to have some way of managing this. So what we could do is we just make a slide on it, which not everybody knows because for some awkward reason it's not a default thing in the course. So we have a lot of great data editors, but not all of them are configured. So when you look at your document types and think, oh, this player I want to manage some skills, so maybe I can just do a numeric. I don't know. But there's actually a slider built in, you just have to configure it, which is really silly, but that's how it works. So let's say I want to create a new data type. I want to use the slider. Oops, not the text. So the slider, and I'm just going to call this something. So I want to say you should be able to go from, let's say, 0 to 100. So that's the idea. Oops. 1 to 100. And increments in 5, that's fine. And it should be horizontal. We're just going to save this. So now, rather than my editor having to guess, how do we define these skills, we just swap this one out and use our something instead. And speaking of usability, you could call it something else than something. But now if I go back to Simon, I can actually say he is, pretty slow. So that's better. But anyway, just make sure that you know the different built-in types. And you don't see them, go to the developer section and data type. Try to create some. You can't really create anything. Also, you can always create multiple versions of it. So you can have a slider that goes from 1 to 100, one that goes from 50 to 10,000. And the same with the rich text editor. You can actually create variants of the rich text editor with different buttons. Not everybody knows that. So that's one little tip. So another thing is, then I want to manage my squad. So I have this awesome multi-node tree picker. I can pick my teammates, which is great. And I can also change, so I can move Morten up. He's the goalkeeper. This really doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, this is really bad usability. Instead, you could have something like this. So you can just pick your players. Of course, me and Per, Dream Striker team. Paul, the mature guy in the company, and put him as the goalkeeper. So you get the idea. And this is actually really easy to do. So let me just show you. If you know your HTML and JavaScript, it's quite easy to do something like this, because that's actually all it takes. So in Umbraco, to do this, I made a folder in Air Plugins. I called it Unicorn Editor, because the team is called Umbraco Unicorns. We have stickers. It gets you free peanut program. No, I wasn't supposed to say that. Anyway, so create a folder called Unicorn Editor. We put in a file called package.manifest. And here we say this should be a property editor. It should save JSON. And when you use it, it should just render this HTML file. And then we also have some JavaScript up here. And this HTML file is actually our editor, and it's quite ugly because I made it. It was a quick hack. But the idea is it's just HTML. It's some div tags with the different players on it. A little bit of Angular in the mix, but if you look at the code and go through it, it's actually surprisingly simple. So what happens is, once this editor loads, we load some CSS to make it look nice, and then we say, well, if there's no player selected already, then we create sort of a model that says there's a goalie, there's a striker, etc. And then we have this method, say add player, takes a position, and then it opens the content picker, which we already have. This is all it takes to open the content picker. And we set a start node, so we can actually define where do we find our players. And then we just return as data the ID of the player, which is the node, and the name of the node. So it's actually, it's 30 lines of code to create an editor like this. And again, you don't need Visual Studio, you don't need to compile anything to do something like this. So there's a ton of videos out there about how to create your own editors. And even if you don't consider yourself a hardcore developer, try some of the tutorials, you'll be surprised how easy it is. And it's actually also quite fun. Not saying that this is awesome usability, just saying it's fun. But this is the idea. Then the final thing is, we have this huge, we're a huge company now, so we only used to be 4 players, so it wasn't a problem. You just have a tree view, but now we're too many, so let's use list views instead. So again, a feature in version 7, we can go to the document type and we can just say, well, this should be a list view instead. We'll just save this. And then if we go back here and refresh, and refresh this view, rather than this long tree, we get a little icon saying this is a list view, and now we get a nice overview of our players here. We can search if we have a lot of content. Just want to edit Shannon, I can just do this. If I want to create a new player, I get fast UI to do that for free with the list view. But when we look at the overview, all this sucks. So sort order doesn't matter. Last edited doesn't matter. Created by doesn't matter. I just want to know how fast they are. You can do that. It's a feature in 7.2, so you can actually, once you set this should be a list view, you can create a custom list view. Just clicking here, and you can edit it, and then I can say what columns do I want. I'm just going to remove these. Makes no sense. I just want the speed like this. Add that one. Page size looks good. Order by, yeah, fine. Just going to save this. Oh, need to give it a header. Should be slow. Save this, and now when I look at the list view, instead I get data that actually makes sense. It's also a small, it's actually a large enhancement in 7.2 that not everybody knows about. So bottom line here is, when I created this sample site, I spent less than half a day, going from quite bad, typically fast hacked Brago editor implementation into actually being something where I had sliders instead of text boxes. I had a nice list view of my players. I had a nice editor where I could select my squad. And you should do the same in your implementation. Go that extra mile to make sure that your editors get a great experience. Make sure you budget it. And it's quite easy to convince clients why they should invest in this, because every time you spend an hour polishing the editor experience in Brago, their editors will probably spend 100, 200 hours over the lifespan of the site. So, I mean, even tiny improvements in the editor experience is really a great return for the client. So again, sum up. With Brago, eventually, we always talk about, how do you develop your site, how do you improve, etc., etc. But it comes down to what is in Brago. It's actually a tool to make sure that eventually someone who's not a developer can enjoy managing their online presence. And the only way to do that is by having a great editor experience. So make sure to prioritize that. Take the time to discover all the built-in features in Brago. Make a dummy installation that you can break. Just click everywhere, see what actually happens, what can you do. That's a great way to learn. And then learn to tailor Brago. It's very easy. Again, you don't need to be a .NET developer to do that. You can extend Brago with pure HTML and JavaScript. And before I finish, I have 30 seconds. Quick roadmap. What we're focusing on these days is what we call a better now. We think with 7.2 we got the features we needed, new fancy features. Now it's all about stabilization. It's been that since the fall. And we think with 7.2.2 it's looking quite good, quite polished and stable release of 7.2 now. Our next priorities is about cleaning up the code. If you ever try to work with the source code of the core, it's almost redundant. There's all my old code, which is there for legacy purposes, and then there's almost code that does the same. It's about 1/10 of the size. But we can't get rid of my code until we sort of jump to version 8, because it will break stuff. But once we do that, Brago will be much faster and easier to work with from a developer side of view. So that's one of the next things that's going to happen. Also likely that we want to take a look at the UX. It's been more than 2 years ago since we made it. We want to just polish it, make it look, and let's say, slightly better, have a bit more of identity in it. That would be nice. Future, we've been talking about this for ages, but one of the things we're also working on is segments in Brago, so you can have segments and variants of your content. Whether that's for different types of users or different languages. It can be quite flexible, but the idea is that you can have one-to-one variations of your nodes. Again, we demoed it as a proof of concept at CodeGuard last year. If we want to do it right, again, it's going to be a breaking change, so that's post V7. Also want to have, one of my pet projects is the idea of having a really nice REST API for Embargo. So if you actually combine that with the identity, then it's getting pretty easy to create hybrid apps using Embargo as the data storage. So if Android played with Ionic or something similar, then if you can build Embargo sites, then you can also create mobile apps, which is kind of nice. And that's a focus area as well. And then much further down the line, cross-platform version of Embargo. There's a new version of ASP.NET coming, ASP.NET 5. It could have been called ASP Million. It has almost nothing to do with ASP.NET. It's totally not backwards compatible. But the cool thing is that it considers mono a first-class citizen, which means that we could actually have Embargo running on Macs, which is a big deal. A lot of Embargos are using Macs. So it's not going to be something you're going to see this year, but it is something that we are monitoring. And we're actually working closely with the ASP.NET team at Microsoft in finding out what it takes. But more important than anything else, we don't want to be the company that builds Embargo behind curtains, because then we're just going to have another V5. We don't want to go there. I think it took 10 years of all of our lives, so just planning on making it to 40 would be nice. But the idea is we need to make sure that the roadmap becomes public and up to date. It's a much bigger task than first anticipated to actually have a live working roadmap, but we're working on it. We're also interviewing our Go partners to hear what should we prioritize. That's some of the stuff we're doing as well. To sort of collect both information from the community, which is usually a lot of dev stuff. We also want to talk to the partners who are actually using Embargo to get the idea of what does the market need for a system like Embargo as well. Then publish our sprint minutes. We run everything in the HQ as in Scrum, do 2 weeks, 2-week sprints. We actually want to have the sprint minutes of what we're doing public, so it's something we're working on as well. And then finally, we want to get back. When we started Embargo, Per and I did some weird podcasts where we were drinking beer and talking about the future and visions of Embargo. We actually want to get back to that. So some of it is going to be with just me and Per mumbling in the lounge area, which is always fun for us. But we also want to have more interactive kind of hangouts, so you don't have to come to the office in Denmark, but you could also participate in something else. But to sum it all up, I don't think there's ever been a better time of being involved in Embargo. We still have massive growth. It's even growing faster the first couple of months this year. I still think we're the friendly CMS. Again, as I said, for me and Per, it's not about building a huge company, it's about building a great product, community first, and then get a great company because of that. And I think most importantly, Per and I had a chat, what was it, 18 months ago, where we were like, this project is getting very big and very serious. There's a lot of people relying on this. And there was some people or companies interested in acquiring Embargo. We were like, should we go that line, or do we still think that there's stuff that, can we manage this project? Because it's actually quite difficult now. It's not just fun anymore to have a project used by more than 250,000 sites. It's also fun, but it's also a lot of hard work. But we were like, there's so much stuff we still need, we still want to do. So we were like, hell no, we're never going to sell this. We're just going to keep doing this, and then we're just going to make sure that we do the stuff that we love as well, which really is share simplicity. This is what the project is all about. So make sure you do that in North America as well, and thank you very much.